Welcome to the presentation Complexity Management with the K Method. I'm afraid the title sounds a bit boring, but I hope that the presentation will be more interesting. Complexity management. What are we talking about? We're talking about packaging materials for FMCGs and maybe pharma, and we're talking about complexity, meaning many specifications of a purchasing category like labels with many different prices. The K method shows you a way how to deal with the huge amounts of different specifications you have in a purchasing category and how you can make the best out of it. Before I start, let me just introduce ourselves. We've developed this K method as a team, and it's my brother and myself. My brother is a professor of computer science of the ETH Zurich, and he's currently now a research director for Microsoft in Seattle. I myself, I have worked for Unilever 17 years in various positions in various countries and work now as a freelancer. The basic idea, what I'm going to present to you now, is to have, instead of individual prices, to have one price formula covering all materials of a category. And this price formula not only covers all the materials you have currently, it also covers the items you will be sourcing in future. So we will not have individual prices anymore, we will have a price formula. This is an example which we have set up for a client, and you can see on this price formula the actual price formula on the right side of this sheet. On the right side you find different line items, formula elements, and you find prices. This example is for labels, and it covers 3 different technologies at a time. So you can print labels in offset, in flexo, or in silkscreen printing. What this price formula does is it has a structure which you will be probably using for all your suppliers, but it also has individual price elements which are specific to a supplier. So with this price formula for the production and the component, the substrate, you have 38 prices covering all the complexity you might have for labels. So if you have a portfolio of 1,000 or 2,000 different label specification, with this price formula you can calculate the price of all of them. To make it easy, we have on the left side we have a specification part, and it's a specification for the label plus a volume for the call-off. In this example we have a label which has the dimension of 55 times 85 millimeters, and we want to make a call-off of 50,000 pieces. This label is using 2 technologies at a time. So the first technology is the offset printing, and the second technology is the number 3, which is silkscreen printing. So you have a label which is a bit more complicated to produce. The offset part will have 8 colors, while the silkscreen part has 3 colors. And to make it even more complicated, we have a number of changeovers. That means this label is a label cluster, and the call-off will have 4 different variants in the offset part, which is typically a language plate or cliche you would want to change. And we have 2 changeovers for the silkscreen part. That might be the part of the label where you show the variant, the flavor variant of the product. This specific label does not have any hot foil blocking, nor does it have cold foil blocking. We don't have a varnish, and we use for the label the polymer type 1, which is this white substrate with the thickness of 85 μ. And we are using an ink coverage of 60% for both printing technologies. So what this price formula does, it will, for this specific call-off, will calculate you a setup price, it will calculate a changeover price, and it will calculate a run over total price. If you add up those three components, you get the total call-off price, and you receive the purchase order price for 1,000 pieces. And that's the price you would put on the purchase order. For those who are thinking already ahead, the setup price and the changeover price normally are the same, and the run-on price will be a third price for 1,000 pieces, and those three prices you would probably want to store in your ERP system, which will be SAP or JD Edwards. And using those three prices and using your call-off, your MRP call-off volume, you will be able to calculate the purchase order price. So you don't need to store the total price formula in your ERP system. It's enough to store in your ERP system the setup price, a changeover price, and the run-on price, and an algorithm can calculate from the MRP run the actual purchase order price. What is imminent for the price formula? That you will ask your supplier not to do any mixed calculation anymore. You probably have some mixed calculation already in your prices. That means some labels or packaging materials items are very expensive, have a very nice margin for the supplier, and others will have a low margin, and in total he will be sorted out and happy with his margin. In this case, you cannot have this anymore, or at least we advocate not to have it anymore, because you don't provide the supplier with a specification volume scenario anymore, volume scenario for the individual call-off. So what you provide him is with a total business, which you might want to express, let's say, in million square meters if we talk about labels or corrugated outers. So he has as only information, he has the volume for which he is going to provide you a more or less favorable price. So if he has only the volume, he has to be prepared for any kind of scenario. It might be a scenario where you just run one or two labels with a high volume with a small number of call-offs, but it might be also a mixture of very simple labels with small production runs or very complicated labels, and whatever happens, the supplier needs to cover his margin probably in respect of his machine hours he requires. So he needs to keep in the back of his head that when he quotes the individual prices for those items, he needs to have in mind his cost and his margin he wants to do for each individual specification. So when he sets up the machine, he needs to make sure that even during the setup process he earns money. So if he says his setup has a certain time, this is the price. It might lead even to the drastic situation where you only call off setups and don't produce any labels, and he still will have a margin. Currently the setup is a non-priced item for the supplier. So the first thing is no mixed calculation. Whatever it is, if it's complex, if it's small, if it is big, he needs to make his constant margin per hour. So that means also for the substrates, this is not the market price of the substrates. It will also have some margin for handling and a profit margin. And that leads us to the second point, no cost analysis. That's a major discussion we have currently is, are we doing here cost engineering? No, we're not doing cost engineering. We're not even interested in the costs. We are doing prices here. That means every item will have its margin, its profit margin, and not linked in percentage to the item, but linked, as I said, to the hour which it requires. And in the end, the supplier is totally free to decide on his profit margin he wants to offer to you, and so he will never disclose his cost. So costs like depreciation, labor, energy, repairs, overheads, and profit are never disclosed in this model. So it is not a cost breakdown, it's not a cost modeling tool, it is a true price formula, it's a price tool. So no mixed calculation and no cost analysis. Now let's look at the benefits, at the advantage of the price modeling. We have 3 blocks. One block is the purchasing cost. You will have lower purchasing cost. Why is that? Because it will help you to have a best price for your tail. Currently, you probably will be negotiating very good, very favorable, aggressive prices for those items which you call A materials, which are very much in focus. But down the tail, you will have less energy to negotiate the prices, and you might have unfavorable prices there. With the price modeling, you get the tail gets the same prices as the high run items, and it means yes, it will have a higher price eventually because the setup and changeover prices, which we'll have with low print runs, will amortize over a lower number of items. So you will have a higher price, but you will have the same total setup price and the same run-on price per 1,000 pieces. That's why you will have lower purchasing costs. And the second is, which is much more important, is you will leverage your volume. Currently, you don't leverage your volume because you negotiate each individual item. And that means when you find an aggressive price for a single packaging item, it does not automatically translate to better prices of other items you have negotiated previously. With the price formula, you negotiate a price formula and it's valid for your total portfolio. So basically, you're commodifying your packaging materials as you know it already from food ingredients or from chemicals you're buying. You're putting all your volume on the plate and you get a price for the plate for this volume. So leveraging your volume will lead also or very strongly to a price reduction. The second thing is the second block is you have lower administration costs. You will have an easier method for tenders, which is very important. As I said, you commodify now your business. Now you need to run tenders more often for packaging. Tenders are difficult for packaging materials because you have to issue a lot of information on specifications. Here you don't issue any specifications anymore, just a total portfolio volume. You will have strength with new material specifications because they're covered by the price formula, optimizing the lot size, the production sequence with the supplier is optimal, and you will accelerate new product cost calculation and standard costing. And the third part, which is an advantage of price formula and the formulas and the K method, is you will receive new insights, and this will help you especially when you do benchmarking between regions and when you do value analysis. I'm going to elaborate now on those 11 advantages, and I'm going to start with the leverage. I've mentioned that you will bring the total portfolio on the table of the supplier when you negotiate, and that means you have an internal leverage of your category, and that is where you will get savings because you will get an aggressive price by the supplier because he's pitching for your total business. So internal leverage is very important. The second one is consistent prices. Consistent prices is something you would be interested in because if you don't have consistent prices, then it is very difficult to negotiate prices. You can bargain, but you cannot negotiate inconsistent prices. Let me take you through an example of this one. This is a commodity market. It's a packaging category, and the packaging category is subject to cycles. So it's a cyclic market, and the market goes up and down and up and down. Mainly in packaging, we know this is driven by feedstock materials. You might have already a feedstock material clause which will not give you such an extreme example because you eliminate the feedstock aspect. But for the sake of the example, let me just show you what it means to have consistent prices and inconsistent prices. Let's assume we have a cyclic market and we need a specification, we need a price for the material A. And material A is a very highly specified material. Let's say it's a label which has big size and it is very complicated. Maybe it has some features like many colors and hot foil blocking. So you will get a price, a market price for material A at this point, because the market is here and you're paying now a premium for the specification. That's all fine and nice. Now, a bit later, you will have to get a quotation for material B. B is also a label. It's an average specification, average print run. So you get what is here the average line, the middle line. So you get a market price for this. So that's your price for material B. And a bit later, you're going to source a material C, which is a very simple material, let's say a pallet label. In the meanwhile, the total label market has declined to this price, so you get the price for material C. So asking quotations at different moments in time for materials A, B, and C gives you different prices because of different specifications. So those are the different lines, and you get different prices because the price of the market has been different. But you buy or you get a quotation always at market price, and that's what good buying is, getting market prices. So time elapses and it's time to do the annual negotiation with the label supplier. And you conclude, since the last time you've done negotiations and adjusted the label price, the total market has declined by 1% in average. So what do you agree with the label supplier? That all the label prices are going to be reduced by 1%. What does it do for the material A? Material A this is the line of the price A. You will reduce it by 1%. Same goes for material B and material C. Both are now 1% below their blue lines. But if you look at them now in relative to the market price, you are now overpaying for material A. That is too much, because the market price for material A would be now here. For material B, it's the same, not as drastic. Here is the market price for material B. And for material C, you are very much paying too low, too little. It's the market price is here, you're paying less. So if you're clever at this moment, you're taking material A and B back to the market, you make a tender, and you probably get market price for those materials. And that leaves you to material C, and the supplier will be very upset because he has subsidized the production of material C by the sale of material A and B, and now he's just left with C, which is making a loss to him. So eventually he will go at some stage out of business with you. He will decline to supply you at this price, and you have upsetted the whole supply chain. So the situation which started with consistent prices became inconsistent because the underlying market development, and then it is very difficult to negotiate this portfolio. So it's very difficult to say if -1 is the correct decision overall, because you might have mixed effects in the volume. So if the volume here increases very much and decreases very much here, you as a buyer take a loss, and other way around, the supplier takes a loss. So that's a difficult situation on consistent prices. It's purely academic, I agree, but when you use the price formula as according to the K method, you automatically will recalculate all your prices with the new price formula, and you will again buy at market prices, which is what you intend to do. Tenders. We've discussed that. I indicated that before. Tenders and packaging materials, for packaging materials are very difficult to make. The first problem is you have to do a huge data collection, get all the specifications, get all the volumes, and get them to the supplier. The second problem is the supplier has to do a lot of work to make the quotation. And then the third, once you have identified the lowest supplier and want to grant him the business, some of your specifications, maybe a third already, have changed in the meanwhile. And normally tenders include a guarantee. It includes a guarantee that you will supply for a certain time period all the labels of a certain scope from, or the packaging materials from a certain scope of the supplier. So what happens when you have a launch or a relaunch? It means that the specification changes and you have not made an agreement with the supplier on this price, but you have already given him the guarantee to supply from him. So he will use the opportunity to regain his margin, but because probably he has won the tender by being prepared to work with the lowest margin. And that means higher prices are creeping in and are ruining over the time your benefits of the tender until you have to make an entire new tender again. So with the K method, with the price formulas, you don't need to send out specifications to the supplier because you only need to ask him for his price formula and his price element prices. And that means you will do the calculation on your certain volume scenario, which might be even only a basket of packaging items you're using. And he will only need to quote a certain small number of prices, definitely not 1,000 or 2,000, but maybe 20 prices, which are the price elements of the price formula. The second thing is there will be no creep in, because the price formula is very aggressive, and will stay aggressive also for changed specifications. So doing tenders with price formulas is very, very efficient, and that's where you are commodifying a true commodity. Actually, you are making use of your total portfolio and buy at best price. New specification. We've discussed that on the tender. When you change specification, when there is a new specification, you don't need to go back to the supplier. You have the price formula and you can calculate a new price. That is very, very advantageous for the price formula, because all your promotional activities, all changes in prices, all new language clusters, and whatever you have, it's all covered by the price formula. So you don't need to worry about new specifications, because the prices are changed automatically. We're coming now I'm sorry for that. We're coming now to the optimal lot size. Optimal lot size is a problem, especially when you use staggered pricing or when you use scale pricing. The problem is when you currently use staggered or scale pricing, it means you have to you have a price picture which is currently like this. It means you have, in this example, you have a certain price for very low volumes, then you have a price of 110 euros when you source 50,000 at a time, and then you have 100 euros when you source 75,000 at a time. So those scale prices or staggered prices give you brackets of performance and of call-off volumes, and they are a problem, because if the threshold price is at 50,000, it means when you have an MRP at 48,000 run a requirement, it means you either order 50,000 and throw 2,000 away, which is cheaper than ordering 48,000 at the higher price. So you artificially cause problems with staggered pricing, which wouldn't have been if you would source at setup and run prices. So with the optimal lot size, with the MRP volume, you can call off without getting the punishment of not obeying threshold prices. Production sequence. We do know that the supplier, when he produces packaging materials, he will have to set up a machine, which is mainly costly, and then produce the packaging material. But we also know that two different materials, packaging material items, don't necessarily require a full setup when they are produced with a supplier in sequence, one after the other. Sometimes just a changeover, which is much cheaper, is sufficient. So if you have such an optimal sequence, you will minimize the number of setups, and you will maximize the number of cheaper changeovers. So what you need to do is you need to identify format groups. It means groups which need to be produced in a group, in a cluster, because the items between them only require a change of the format, a cliche, a printing plate, or some small tool, and you will have setups only at the beginning of the production of a format group. Using the K method, this is automatically embedded into the price formula. So when you do the call off, you explicitly make the format groups and make sure you minimize the number of setups. Product costing. We're now looking at the classical product costing process in a launch or relaunch exercise with an FMCG. So you have in the starting point, in the middle of it, development and marketing, who are looking at scenarios for the launch or the relaunch. So they're coming up with specification, and the controlling department will look at the specification and do the product costing. In order to do the product costing, it will pass on the specification to the procurement department to get the prices for new specification of packaging items. The buyer typically will ask his supplier and ask him to make a quotation, because there's a launch process or relaunch process, and the supplier is happy to make a quotation and feed it back to the buyer, who feeds it back to the controller. The controller will do his product cost calculation, and the marketing and development will decide if the product costing and the specification is sufficient. The problem here is the supplier cannot give his best price because it's just a project, but he cannot give a very bad price because he will kill the project. So he will give a good price but not his best price. So in the end we have a specification. If they're happy, then it will be a final specification. If they're not happy, this loop starts all over again. So marketing has decided for the specification for the launch, and they will give clearance. So the controller will do his final product cost calculation and will ask procurement now to do the real negotiation. So the supplier will get another haircut because it's now for real. This is real business now. He will give back the price to procurement. The controller will then make the final product costing and will feed it back to marketing. So that's the traditional process of product costing in the context of a launch or relaunch. If you use the K method with the price formulas, the process looks like this. We have the core loop here in the development phase, but what we don't have anymore, we have not the necessity to involve procurement in this process unless it's an entire new packaging technology. And so the controller has the price formula. It's a living price formula. It's the most aggressive price the business has currently. So it can use the price formula to do the product costing. And once marketing has decided, it's already the final product costing, and there will be no haircut for the supplier. If we look at standard cost, you can use the price formula for standard cost. You just feed in the average number of call-offs per year and the average number of changeovers, and the price formula will deliver to you the standard cost of an item. Feedstock materials is a big issue when it comes to packaging materials. The feedstock materials are explicitly part of the price formula, and they are explicitly in grams and in liters and in kilograms, and not in percentage. Because the problem is, when you use percentages as a feedstock material, saying an average corrugated outer 60% paper, it means when the paper price goes up, mathematically, technically, the 60% also increases. But normally this is not taken care of properly. So the price formula in terms of feedstock materials is very precise in this respect. Benchmarking. If you're a big corporation, have different regions, you can use price formulas to benchmark the performance and the pricing of different regions. You just need to take the specification of one region, the specifications, and calculate them with the price formula of another region, and you can see how well they are doing. So benchmarking between regions is very much enabled through price formulas, even when the regions have totally different specifications and totally different volume scenarios. Value analysis. Since we have a price formula and it can calculate any type of specification, you can make use of this. Let's have an example. Let's have labels again, and the basic label is 45mm in height. And now we want to run a bit of value analysis and look what happens when we increase the height of the label by in steps of 2mm. So if you increase the label height of 47 to have more facing, to have more information on the label, you will see that your height will increase by 4.4%, but your price will only increase by 1.3%. So that's a good deal if you need to do that. If you do that once again, 49, you have again a very good deal. But suddenly when you increase another 2mm to 51, suddenly the costs explode. Why is this? In this price formula we have an effective print width of 350mm, so you can print 7 labels at a time. But in the moment you go from 50mm to 51mm, you only can print 6 labels at a time, and you're not making best use of the print width of the machine, and that's why you have a relative high price increase. So if you go down a bit, you see here, if you just take 2mm out from the label, you can reduce the cost by 8.4%, because that's another threshold, and that's now 8 labels at a time. So if you have to consult marketing, 45mm for that specific label in that specific scenario is not an optimal height. Maybe you want to reduce the heights to 43%, and then you have a significant cost saving, or you can increase it at really marginal cost increase by 4mm to get more information on the label. So this concludes the presentation on the K method and its price formulas. I've showed you how the price formulas work. You have major advantages in the price, in the internal process of sourcing, and in value analysis. If you want to learn more about the K method and price formulas, we have also a software called Cavallo, which translates all what I've presented to you to a very efficient process using a web module where the price formulas are stored and the specifications are stored, and an SAP module or plugin which holds setup changeover and run prices, and makes from a purchase order a requirement, from a requirement of the ERP system. It optimizes the sequence and calculates the purchase order prices. And those two modules have an interface with each other. So if you're more interested, please have a look at the video of the Cavallo software, where there's a full presentation of the software and all the features of the Cavallo set modules. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call us at K-Method Consulting. On the internet page, you find all our contact details. Thank you very much.